The coin of Ares, second of his name, had landed on madness. But half the coins of the Targaryens had landed so. Yet only Ares would be known as the Mad King, thanks in no small part to the defiance of Duskendale. Duskendale was the greatest port on Blackwater Bay until Aegon built King's Landing. As the capital grew richer and more prosperous, it sucked ships and gold away from Duskendale. To halt its long decline, the Lord of Duskendale, Sir Dennis Darklyn, petitioned King Aerys for a royal charter that would allow him to levy his own port fees and taxes, which would obviously be lower than in King's Landing. The Hand of the King, Tywin Lannister, refused. But, knowing of the tension between the Hand and its king, Sir Dennis invited the king to Duskendale to evaluate his petition himself rather than deferring to his Hand. When Tywin admonished the king to refuse, as any sensible advisor would, a petulant and bristling Aerys instead accepted, traveling to Duskendale with a small retinue and only one of his Kingsguard. As soon as Aerys stepped within the city, Sir Dennis seized him, killing the Kingsguard and the few others who dared defend their king. Aerys was hauled to the dungeons to have his beard pulled, and have other petty cruelties inflicted on his royal person. Lord Tywin immediately raised an army and marched on Duskendale, but Sir Dennis threatened to kill the king at the first signs of an assault. If Sir Dennis hoped to force Tywin to offer terms, he didn't know Lord Tywin, who refused to even parley until Sir Dennis released the king and surrendered. The royal army surrounded the city, and the royal navy blockaded it. Sir Dennis had clearly not anticipated such obstinacy, nor that the king's Hand would be in no rush to save the maddening king, when, as Lord Tywin himself pointed out, the realm had a better option in the king's much more stable son, Prince Rhaegar. After 6 months, Lord Tywin's patience was at an end. Or at least, none could claim he acted recklessly if he now stormed the city and Sir Dennis killed the king. But the dutiful and honorable Sir Barristan the Bold volunteered to infiltrate the city and rescue his king single-handedly, as befit his Kingsguard oath. Tywin couldn't refuse such valor, publicly, and so begrudged Sir Barristan one night. Then he would storm the city and put every man, woman, and child to the sword. With only his hands, Sir Barristan climbed the city walls in the dark of night and snuck through the city disguised as a beggar, evading patrols and suspicious townspeople. When he reached the walls of the city keep, the Dun Fort, he scaled those by hand as well, even dispatching the wall guard before he could sound an alarm. With incredible bravery and luck, Sir Barristan made his way to the dungeons and freed his king. Then Sir Barristan's luck ran out. A cry went up through the castle. Someone had discovered the king was gone. With horns and trumpets blaring an alarm, Sir Barristan cut their way to the stables, avenging his slain Kingsguard brother, but taking an arrow to his chest. Slipping through the castle gate just as it closed, the wounded Sir Barristan and Aerys rode through the roused town, racing for the city walls and beyond it the safety of the royal army. Lord Tywin's archers raced forward to clear the walls of defenders, and Sir Barristan the Bold earned immortality by delivering King Aerys to the waiting, if not welcoming, arms of his Hand. Without his hostage, Sir Dennis surrendered and begged mercy from the same king he'd imprisoned. Most men would have had none. Aerys had less. He commanded Sir Dennis to be executed along with any man, woman, or child who bore his family name, and anyone who once had. As for Sir Dennis's foreign wife, who had urged his defiance, Aerys commanded that her tongue and womanly parts be torn out, and she be burned alive. It was his first time passing such a sentence. It must have given him a taste for it. For the king rescued from Duskendale was not the same king who'd entered it. Many men would crack after 6 months in a dark cell, being mocked, prodded, and tweaked. Aerys had arrived cracked. Now he was shattered. For years he would refuse to leave the Red Keep. Encouraged no doubt by his worried advisors, since he also refused to allow any blades near his person, even to shave his beard, cut his hair, and trim his nails. He began to see enemies in every shadow, who vanished only when the fires burned.
As years went on, Aerys' temper soured. He became obsessed with dragons and fire, and the swords of the King's Guard couldn't defend him from the enemies he saw lurking in every shadow. My king went mad. But there was hope. His son and heir. Prince Rhaegar was everything a kingdom could hope for in a ruler. He was strong but gentle, wise and cautious, and a good friend. No matter the wounds Aerys dug into the realm, we had faith that his son would sew it back together again when he ascended the throne. Then came Lord Went's tourney at Harrenhal, the largest ever in Westeros. I unhorsed every man against me until only Prince Rhaegar remained. We each set our feet in our saddles and lowered our lances and charged. And I fell. Muddy and bruised, I then watched Rhaegar present Lyanna Stark with the victor's crown of roses, though she was betrothed to Robert Baratheon, and Rhaegar himself was married to Elia Martell.
Elia loved Rhaegar. She obeyed him, and he chose to steal away Lyanna Stark, a pale northern girl whose veins ran with ice like all her people.
Then the Targaryens went too far. The Crown Prince Rhaegar abducted Lyanna Stark, daughter of Rickard Stark, the Lord of Winterfell. She was my betrothed. She was my beloved. Beautiful and spirited woman, and I loved her more than life itself. Rhaegar went south with Lyanna, hiding her away in Dorne. What harm he inflicted on the poor girl, the gods only know.
Hot-blooded as always, Brandon immediately rode for King's Landing to demand justice, which the Mad King Aerys Targaryen gave him, in his own twisted fashion.
Aerys arrested him for treason, and called his father to come to the capital to ransom him. When Lord Rickard complied, Aerys, now utterly mad, arrested him for treason as well. Lord Rickard demanded a trial by combat. Aerys declared fire the champion of House Targaryen, and had Lord Rickard suspended from the rafters of the throne room while pyromancers lit a blaze beneath him. As he burned, Brandon was brought into the throne room. A leather cord attached to a strangulation device was wrapped around his neck. Aerys told Brandon his father was a dead man, but there was a chance to save him. A longsword was placed on the floor just out of Brandon's reach, and the more he struggled to reach it, the more the cord tightened around his throat. Brandon Stark strangled himself, trying to free his father, who was roasted alive in his own armor. The entire court stood and watched this atrocity take place. Sir Jaime Lannister and the King's Guard among them. The Mad King was reported to have laughed hysterically as these two noble men were tortured and brutally killed before him. Seeking to rid the world of all his supposed enemies, Aerys called for the head of Rickard's younger son, Eddard Stark, and Lyanna's betrothed, Robert Baratheon. He sent word to Lord Jon Arryn, who had fostered both young men at the Eyrie, to apprehend them. Instead, Lord Arryn joined houses Stark and Baratheon in rebellion. Robert vowed to kill Rhaegar Targaryen and get his beloved Lyanna back.
While Ned Stark and Arryn secured an alliance with the Tullys of Riverrun, I called the banners of Storm's End and rode out in force against the Mad King and his minions. Gods, those were some battles. Our first victory occurred at Summerhall, where I faced off against an army of dragon loyalists and won 3 battles in a single day. 3 in one day. 7 hells, that was a glorious day. We tried to take Ashford Castle in the Reach, but the Tyrells beat us back. We had to regroup My army was pursued north by Eris's army and took refuge in the Stony Sept in the Riverlands.
The hand of the king finally cornered Robert in the town of the Stony Sept and sent his soldiers door to door searching for the rebel leader. But the villagers hated the Mad King and loved Robert and kept him one step ahead of the soldiers until only one refuge remained. As the soldiers closed in, all the town bells rang out. Hearing of Robert's plight, our father and Jon Arryn had rushed to the Riverlands and enlisted our grandfather Hoster Tully to help them. Together, they routed the Hand's army and rescued Robert. To celebrate and cement the Tully alliance, our father wed our mother Catelyn, and Jon Arryn took our aunt Lysa. Only a fortnight later, both men rushed back into the field, for the dragon had finally woken.
Early in the war, Mace Tyrell's indecisive victory at Ashford cut Robert off from Storm's End. Instead of pursuing Robert and risking his record, Mace Tyrell turned east and laid siege to our home. His vast army and navy encircled us and prevented any resupply by land or sea. If a wagon tried to reach us, it was burnt. If a ship tried to land, it was sunk. We were locked in Storm's End to starve, but Robert commanded me to hold the castle no matter the cost. He could ill afford to lose his ancient seat, which had never fallen.
When Mace Tyrell marched on Robert's home of Storm's End, as by the end of the rebellion, the castle was garrisoned by Robert's younger brother Stannis and a small guard, and would not hold out for long. When it fell, Robert would be homeless, and his support would bleed away. This I knew from experience. Months later, Stannis was still holding the castle. Nobody cared. But on voyages, I had seen what famine does, and I thought of all those men in Storm's End who would die unmourned and forgotten, no better than flea-bottom orphans. I told my wife and myself that I'd get a high price for the onions and salt beef. In truth, I knew I'd be captured by the Tyrell galleys or drowned, but I was too stubborn. Later that night, in the dark, in a tiny boat with a black sail, I cursed myself and the moonlight as I waited for the tide to turn. When it did, the wind beat the sail so hard I ripped it down, fearing the Tyrell ships would hear. Luckily, they'd grown lax. With muffled oars alone, I steered my cargo through the treacherous currents and snarls of rock that gave Shipbreaker Bay its name. The waves finally carried me, soaked and near blind from sea water, through the mouth of the cavern beneath the castle. Then Stannis Baratheon arrived. The siege had left him gaunt, but not weak, never weak. He greeted me and accepted my onions with cool courtesy, betraying no emotion, even as all wept. He doled out the food to his wife and each of his men before he ate himself, a portion no larger than any other. When he finally thanked me, I could see his mind had already returned to the castle's defense. His duty.
Ravens soon arrived with dark news for the king. The Vale was in open revolt. Demanding Lyanna Stark's return, Robert Baratheon was smashing any army that dared face him. Eddard Stark, Brandon's younger brother, was marching the whole of the north down the neck and had taken Catelyn Tully, Brandon's betrothed, for his own, thus winning the support of the Riverlands. The king sent ravens to Casterly Rock to beg his former hand, Tywin Lannister, for help. And no ravens returned.
While my father's servants were losing my father's kingdoms, my brother Rhaegar had been cooped up with his mistress, whore, whatever else, I'd call her a distraction. But now Rhaegar came to his senses and returned to King's Landing. He persuaded our father to summon his estranged friend, Lord Tywin Lannister, the richest and most powerful lord in the realm. Rhaegar himself would lead the royal army against the usurper, Robert.
A plan was devised. Prince Rhaegar would personally lead the royal forces, now reinforced with 10,000 Dornishmen, north to face Robert. Of the King's Guard, Luwin Martell and I would ride with the prince. Before we left, the prince confided in me that when he returned from this battle, there would be a great many changes in court. Despite my vows to the king, I confess I was excited. On the march to face Robert's army, we were sure we'd win. We had superior numbers, and we had Prince Rhaegar. His presence lifted the spirits of our men, and he looked every inch the king he was destined to become. But at the Trident, the gods played a cruel joke. Robert proved the Baratheon words as his army smashed through our lines.
Aerys' son, Rhaegar, who started the whole damn thing, finally emerged from hiding in the south and assembled his own army to face us. As for the Mad King, he must have been pissing himself. The battle that would decide the fate of the Seven Kingdoms occurred at the crossing of the Green Fork of the Trident River. Rhaegar commanded the royal host, which was some 40,000 strong. My forces were outnumbered by nearly 5,000 men, but that didn't matter. They were fresh, but we were battle-hardened and had justice on our side. As the battle raged around us, I faced off with Rhaegar, the stag and the dragon right there in the ford of the river. I fought with the fury of 10 men, raining blow after blow upon that vile prince before burying my warhammer in his chest. I hit him so hard the rubies on his armor broke free, flinging them into the stream. They call it the Ruby Ford now. With that scum Rhaegar dead and the royal army shattered, our next move was to make for King's Landing. But I'd sustained a few wounds in the battle and was unable to ride. I sent Ned Stark to the capital to face the Mad King and make him pay for his crimes.
Lewin Martell was killed. I fell in combat, badly wounded, and could do nothing but watch as Robert's warhammer ended Rhaegar's glorious reign before it began, and the kingdom that would never be washed away down the Trident with his life's blood. But Robert spared me, insisting his personal maester tend to my wounds, out of respect. But respect for what? A king's guard shouldn't survive one king, let alone two, and one who should have been. I swore an oath to House Targaryen, and I failed them.
As Robert's army marched on King's Landing, the Mad King sent his own wife and child away, but kept my sister and hers inside. In his madness, Aerys thought that the Dornish had betrayed his son at the Trident.
With Rhaegar's defeat, nothing stood between Robert and King's Landing. Imagine the king's surprise a fortnight later when he saw not stags, but lions outside his gates. His former hand, Tywin Lannister, had come to the capital with a force even Robert couldn't match, claiming to be loyal to the king.
You weren't always so loyal to the Lannisters during the war, were you?
I did my duty to the realm. When Lord Tywin showed up at King's Landing professing loyalty, I warned Aerys not to open the gates. Prince Rhaegar was dead, our army scattered. The lion does not stir unless he smells meat.
I admire your powers of persuasion, Lord Varys. Few could traffic in so many secrets to so little avail.
Grand Maester Pycelle told Aerys what he wanted to hear, that his old friend Tywin was there to save him.
Trusting what he wanted to believe, Aerys ordered the gates opened, and the Lannister forces dutifully began to rape, pillage, and murder the king's actual loyal subjects.
Aerys Targaryen was alone in his throne room when I found him, picking at his scabbed and bleeding hands. The fool was always cutting himself in the Iron Throne. Burn them, he kept muttering. Aerys had decided to let Robert be king after all, over the charred bones and ashes of King's Landing. He must have thought his pyromancer was near enough to obey him, but I'd killed him a few minutes before in the courtyard. As I approached the throne, sanity flashed behind the king's eyes for a moment, just long enough to read the look in mine. His eyes grew huge and the royal mouth drooped open in shock. He turned and ran. A single thrust was all it took to end the greatest dynasty the world had ever seen. Beneath the empty eyes of the dead dragons on the walls, the last Dragon King squealed like a pig and shat himself. So easy, I thought. A king should die harder than this. My father's knights burst into the hall in time to see the last of it, so there was no way for me to vanish and let some braggart steal the glory or blame. I knew at once when I saw the way they looked at me, it would be blame. Lannister or no, I'd been one of Aerys' Kingsguard. I commanded them to announce that the Mad King was dead, and to spare all those who yielded. They asked me if they should proclaim a new king as well. I knew what they meant. Would it be my father, or Robert Baratheon, or maybe the child Viserys who'd fled to Dragonstone? A Targaryen boy king with my father's hand to rule in truth. I thought of how Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon would howl at this end to their great heroic war, and I was tempted. Then I glanced down again at Aerys, his life's blood oozing from the wound and pooling on the floor around him. Proclaim who you bloody well like, I said. I climbed the steps to the Iron Throne and sat on it with my sword across my knees, waiting to see who would come to claim the kingdom.
All this could have been forgiven. War is terrible, and men must become terrible to wage it. But the Lannisters knew that as long as my sister and her children, Prince Rhaegar's heirs, lived, no usurper could safely sit the throne. So Lord Tywin's dog, Sir Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, made Elia watch as he murdered her daughter and dashed her infant son's head against a wall. Then, with her baby's blood still on his hands, he raped my sister and murdered her. When Lord Tywin later presented their bodies to Robert Baratheon wrapped in pretty Lannister cloaks, I have been told the red color graciously hid the blood from men's eyes.
Lord Eddard was horrified by what he saw when he entered the city. Homes looted and burned, women raped, scores of innocent citizens killed. Disgusted, he led his force up Visenya's hill to the Red Keep. Upon entering the throne room, he found King Aerys lying in a pool of blood, dead by the hand of his own sworn King's Guard, Jaime Lannister, who sat brazenly upon the throne. Demanding to know the whereabouts of Queen Rhaela, Lord Eddard was informed the Queen and her son Viserys had been spirited away to Dragonstone before the Lannisters arrived, but other members of the royal family were not as fortunate. Elia Martell of Dorne, who was the wife of Prince Rhaegar, had been raped and murdered by Sir Gregor Clegane on Lord Tywin's orders. Sir Gregor and his man had also butchered Rhaegar's young children. When Robert was well enough to reach the capital, Lord Eddard demanded the Lannisters answer for their heinous crimes. Robert refused, and sent him south to relieve the Baratheon stronghold of Storm's End, which was still under siege by forces loyal to the crown.
Had I been able to ride, perhaps I could have reached King's Landing sooner and prevented some of the violence that occurred when the Lannisters entered the city. Still, what Lord Tywin did was for the greater good. Even what happened to Princess Elia and her children. Babies or no, theirs was the same cursed blood that flowed within the Mad King's veins. They were dragon spawn and couldn't be allowed to survive. What would they grow to be? Loyal subjects? Ned with his damn northern honor. He and I had our first major fight over the deaths of the Targaryen children. Ned called it murder. Murder? It was war. It was war. Lord Stark demanded that the Lannisters be held responsible for their crimes. Was it a crime to put an end to a family of lunatics born of incest? I wouldn't and still won't blame Tywin. Instead, I sent Ned Stark south to finish off the remaining Targaryen loyalists.
But I held the castle until Lord Eddard remembered us and marched to lift the siege. The Tyrells didn't even put up a fight. And Robert threw a feast to celebrate Lord Eddard's victory. I was sent to the Royal Island stronghold of Dragonstone to deal with Viserys and Daenerys, the last surviving Targaryen children. Before I arrived, however, they escaped across the narrow sea. Robert was furious. He stripped me of Storm's End and gave it to that prancing fool Renly, my younger brother.
When the usurper heroically sent men to kill me and my newborn sister to protect his stolen throne, a loyal knight smuggled us across the narrow sea to Essos.
Here we have lived in exile ever since, dreaming of a day when we will cross the narrow sea and take back my father's throne.
After Aerys fell and Lord Stark lifted the siege, Stannis summoned me. For my salvation at Storm's End, I was to be granted a knighthood, a keep of my own, and my son taken into Stannis' personal service. Davos of Flea Bottom had become Sir Davos of House Seaworth, and his son would serve the king's own brother. But for my previous crimes as a smuggler, I was to have the fingertips of one hand taken off above the highest joint. Stannis held that I had flouted the laws of the land for years, and a good act does not wash out the bad. In one fell swoop, or 5, Stannis gave my son a future and my family a name that I could never have imagined, nor earned on my own. I still keep the finger bones in a bag around my neck, to remind me what I was and what I owed to Stannis.
Later, when Robert was crowned, he appointed Jon Arryn as Hand of the King. Lord Arryn's first order of business was to broker a truce with the Martells of Dorne, who were outraged by the brutal murder of Princess Elia and her children. Following the death of Lyanna Stark, who had been betrothed to Robert, houses Baratheon and Lannister were joined in marriage when the new king took Tywin Lannister's eldest daughter Cersei as his queen. As for Eddard Stark, he returned to his stronghold of Winterfell, forever haunted by his sister's death and the shameful way that Robert had secured his throne.
Robert won, and my husband avenged his brother and my love. But when he came home to me, he could not meet my eyes. I saw the reason by his side. Many men have bastards, I know, and under the strain of war, any man, no matter how honourable, may forsake his vows for a night of warmth that he may never know again. But Ned Stark was not built like other men. His northern honour would not let him sequester his shame in some distant holdfast. He brought this boy, this Jon Snow, home to raise with his true-born children. My children.